A pregnant woman ate her own placenta to survive because she was stranded at sea for an entire month. With no food or water, she did everything possible to stay alive for the sake of her unborn child, but survival seemed almost impossible in the vast ocean. The country she came from had very limited resources, not enough to feed everyone. To maintain control, the people in power sentenced many, including pregnant women and children, to death over the past 50 years. In an effort to escape this horrifying place, many families attempted illegal migration. Nu was one of them. Along with several others, she was packed into a shipping container. Although smugglers were in charge of their transport, the customs authorities still conducted thorough inspections. A bald man entered the container, but found nothing suspicious at first. However, being a clever man, he quickly called his men and stationed them outside the container. He stepped out and counted his steps toward the end of the container, then ordered his men to fire shots at a specific point. 2 bullets later, the holes in the container indicated a hidden mezzanine inside. The bald man then demanded those inside the container come out voluntarily, promising them safety. Otherwise, he threatened to kill everyone. One woman opened the container door, never imagining it would lead to her death. Amidst the terrifying screams of the crowd, the bald man ordered his men to open fire on everyone. In less than a minute, the ground was covered with bodies. Among the victims was a young girl who was shot moments after surviving the first round of fire. The only survivor was Nu, who had climbed onto the container's roof. She was too scared to make a sound until all the bodies were dragged away. Desperately wanting to contact her missing husband, she found herself alone and frightened. Later, the container Nu was hiding in was loaded onto a ship and eventually abandoned on shore. She found a motorcycle left behind by someone and discovered an electric drill, half a bottle of water, an old Nokia phone, and a knife. At the time, she had no idea these items would become crucial for her survival. After an unknown period, the ship faced a violent storm at sea. The container was thrown overboard by the waves, and Nu was knocked unconscious when she hit the container wall. When she woke up, seawater was rapidly filling the container. Through the bullet holes, she realized they were already in the middle of the ocean, and to make matters worse, the old Nokia phone screen had shattered, making it impossible to unlock. Desperately searching through the belongings of the deceased, she found the Nokia phone still locked with a password. Panic set in as seawater continued to flood through the bullet holes. She opened a storage compartment inside the container and found a box of insulation material. Quickly, she used it to seal the holes and slow down the water's entry. As she continued exploring the container's cabinets, she found an extra-large 40-inch TV, but watching a variety show was the last thing on her mind. In another compartment, she found a pair of headphones and a bottle of strong alcohol. Hanging from the ceiling was the last cabinet, which was hard to open. Fortunately, she found a utility knife and managed to gather a few essential supplies. Despite her efforts, the container kept taking on water. She heard a woman's voice coming from another nearby container, possibly carried by the flow of water or the weight shift of the cargo. Nu wanted to help, but there was nothing she could do. Her stomach pain grew unbearable, a painful reminder that she was heavily pregnant. Desperation drove her to consider ending her life with the knife, but at that moment, her unborn child kicked her, reminding her that there was still a reason to fight for survival. By the third day, the insulation materials sealing the bullet holes began falling apart. Facing the imminent threat of drowning, Nu risked her life to cut open another container bag. Inside, she found a food preservation kit. Inspired by the airtight seals on the food boxes, she used the sealing gaskets to plug the bullet holes and slow the water's entry. Using a pipe from the TV cabinet, she attempted to drain the water, but it had little effect. She shifted the weight inside the container, trying to balance it and prevent it from sinking. Meanwhile, she kept trying to call for help, but there was still no signal on the phone. As days passed, her labor pains grew more intense. A heavy rainstorm battered the container, and in this extreme environment, Nu's determination shone through. Eventually, she gave birth to her child, but their survival was still uncertain. Food and water were scarce, just one small can and a piece of bread. Using the electric drill, Nu attempted to break through the container's iron walls, but the battery died before she could finish. As supplies dwindled, temperature extremes made sleeping impossible, and hunger drove her to the edge of madness. After days without proper nourishment, she collected a small amount of seawater but refrained from drinking it. When she was at her weakest, rainwater finally provided some relief. Collecting it in plastic containers, she and her child found a temporary respite from thirst. One day, Nu spotted a passing airplane. Desperate to attract its attention, she broke the TV screen, grabbed a shard of glass, and climbed to the top of the container. But in her haste, she injured herself on the sharp edges of the container's iron sheet. Bleeding heavily, she sterilized a copper wire from the TV's motherboard with the strong alcohol and used it to stitch her wound shut. Despite the pain, she continued to fight for survival. 10 days in, she fashioned a makeshift fishing net from the headphone wires, using her child's waste as bait. The plan worked, attracting a school of fish, and she finally caught some. However, her child's health was deteriorating due to starvation. Nu's only hope now was her child. With some food, water, and a partially functioning drainage system, their chances improved slightly. She sent distress messages in bottles into the ocean, hoping someone would find them. One night, after weeks of silence, Nute's broken phone finally received a call from her husband. With the shattered screen barely functioning, she managed to answer. Her joy turned to heartbreak when he revealed that his container had been discovered, and while escaping, he was shot. Before dying, his final words were a promise of love and a plea for her to stay strong for their child. Devastated but determined, Nuke held on for her baby's sake. On the 26th day, the container was half submerged. In a last-ditch effort, she prepared an escape plan using a food container as a makeshift life raft. The appearance of a seagull brought Hope a sign of nearby land, but before she could reach safety, the container's buoyancy reached its limit and sank rapidly. As she tried to escape, her foot became entangled in a rope, dragging her deeper underwater. Finally freeing herself, she surfaced in complete darkness, unable to see her baby. Suddenly, a massive killer whale surfaced near her, its blowhole spraying water over the baby, waking the child and drawing Noon toward its cries. After an exhausting search, she found her baby but lost sight of their makeshift raft. The cold night passed, with the two of them clinging to each other for warmth and survival. The next day, she used fish bones to attract seagulls again. This time, a group of fishermen spotted them and rushed to their rescue. Both New and her baby were saved. Despite her near-fatal condition, she regained consciousness and realized this was no dream. After a month of suffering and survival, they had finally been rescued.